How do we mark that first day, that hour, that minute, the white line docked at a point that would be of no comfort to the 20 enslaved Africans chained in her bowels, heralds of a coming storm of millions whose bodies would break through soil and rock to build on America that could never fully embrace the progenitors?
How do we mark that day, that hour, that minute that foreshadowed the centuries of degradation, violence, of attempts to separate the soul and spirit from the deep well of Black lives?
How do we mark that day, that hour, that minute 400 years ago when the first drop of African sweat commingled with the earth's warmth, planting the seeds of a new culture, a new way of life, a new heartbeat into the fabric of a new world?
When the roots of freedom sparked deep underground and spread from generation to generation, blossoming into resistance and resilience.
So today we will ring bells of sorrow, bells of grief, bells of atonement.
We will ring out the ghosts of those lost in the middle passages, lost to whips and deprivation, lost to the lynches and the bullets, lost to the prisons and the chains of racism.
Today, we will ring bells so that tomorrow we may ring in freedom, ring in liberation, ring in peace.
What an incredible gift to have the Ring Out Bell Choir back, live and in person. Thank you. Buenos días y bienvenidos, mi gente. Good morning and welcome to Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm the Reverend Katie Romano Griffin. My pronouns are she or ella. And I want you to know that whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are, whatever your beliefs, gender, identity, disability, or immigration status, you are welcome here at Cedar Lane. If you're new or if you feel new to Cedar Lane, I invite you to complete the Newcomer Forum in the chat, or if you're here in person, please raise your hand and someone will bring a tablet to you so that you can complete the form. And if you've been attending for a while and you're interested in being a member of this vibrant religious community, please reach out to myself or Nicole Singer, our membership coordinator. Our pastoral visitors are an extension of the ministry team. We have pastoral visitors here to support today. Joanne Jersey is here with us. Barbara Tomar is here with us. And they can support you during the service, and you can always reach us on the pastoral care line online. Before we begin, we have a few announcements, and I think we need to start talking about the Kiplinger lecture.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yes.
So if you're in the House and you're a member of the Kiplinger team that helped bring Congressman Jamie Raskin here for that mic drop of an ethical reading of the Constitution, please rise in body or spirit so we may recognize you. Thank you. And if you served as a hospitality volunteer or on security or AV, or maybe you attended online or in person, maybe you asked a question or you shared with someone you know, please rise in body or spirit so that we can recognize you. I want you all to know that so far, there are 519 views on YouTube, and that number is growing exponentially, because of everyone sharing the good news that Jamie brought to us, Congressman Jamie Raskin brought to us last night. And thank you to the Kiplinger family as well. Thanks to you, too.
Oh, thank you.
You brought it last night.
Thank you, Reverend Katie. And continuing on with our ritual of communing with announcements, the next Sunday, November 21st, we will be supporting the Manna Food Drive again this year. So please bring non-perishable food items for the Manna Thanksgiving Food Drive to church next Sunday. And Roger DeLucia has been passing out some of the flyers of the kind of foods that you might be able to bring. We really appreciate your generosity of support for this very important and critical need that Manna continues to support in our community.
Well, it is time to register, if you haven't yet, for Friendsgiving. We need everyone's registration in by November 20th because Maria's Cafe in Wheaton is catering Friendsgiving this year. So we hope that you will come and bring friends or family. Just make sure you register first by November 20th, and then we'll see you here at 2 p.m. on Thursday, November 25th for a Friendsgiving feast.
Yesterday, during the Kiplinger lecture, Representative Raskin talked about how Congress needs to pass the Build Back Better plan, and when it reconvenes this week. And so, in order to put pressure on Congress and call them in and call them out to do the right thing, the Poor People's Campaign is convening a major rally and nonviolent direct action tomorrow at the front of the Supreme Court at noon. And I will be joining Reverend William Barber, other faith leaders, moral leaders, and poor and low-income people from many states who are converging on the Capitol to really get the attention, not only for the Build Back Better plan, but also to pass voting protections to save our democracy. Friends, if you're able, join us in person or online for this very important witness.
As we enter this time of reflection and remembrance, connection and community, we acknowledge that we gather as Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church on the traditional land of the Nacotchtank people from which the name Anacostia was derived. They were part of the Piscataway group of tribes. We honor that the indigenous people of this land were here before us, are here with us now, and will continue to be with us in the future. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have protected it throughout the generations.
We remember those who were enslaved and worked this land without choice or reward. And we remember all who have gone before us, whose vision and labor and sacrifice help create and sustain this, our religious community. In this spirit, we gather. In this spirit, we begin. Let us now greet and welcome each other in person and in the chat. And center ourselves as we come together as a community to kindle the chalice of our gathered being and community.
Let us center ourselves and enter into this moment breathing deeply, calling upon all the sources of love that are within, among, and around us. We gather in this sanctuary of caring across time and space, a place set aside as a sanctuary amid the many challenges of life, a center from which we may gather strength to face these challenges with courage and hope, faith and love. In this time of reflection, we lift up those in our community and beyond who are living through significant passages, the small and extraordinary milestones of life. Within our Cedar Lane community, we celebrate with Joanne and Steve Jersey, who are the proud and excited grandparents of Heath Lattimore Edmonds, born Friday, November 5th, to Jordan Jersey Edmonds and Andrew Edmonds. We offer hearty congratulations to Roger Santo Domingo, who was recently named the executive editor at UU World Magazine. Our caring extends beyond Cedar Lane.
As Kathleen Nepper kindles the chalice again this morning, we invite you to share in the chat, those of you who are joining us online, where you are lighting your chalice from, to face the world's shadows, a chalice of light. To face the world's coldness, a chalice of warmth. To face the world's terrors, a chalice of courage. To face the world's turmoil, a chalice of peace. May its glow fill our spirits, our hearts, and our lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
The wind brings your names. We will never dissever your names, nor your shadows beneath each branch and tree.
The truth comes in the wind, is carried by water. There is such a thing as truth. Tell us how you got over. Say, soul, I look back in wonder.
Your names were never lost, each name a holy word.
The rock cries out. Call out each name to sanctify this place.
Sounds in human voices, silver or soil, a moan, a sorrow song, a keen, a cackle, harmony, a hymnal, handbook, chart, a sacred text, a stomp, an exhortation.
Ancestors, you will find us still in cages, despised and disciplined. You will find us still misnamed. Here, you will find us despite.
You will not find us extinct. You will find us here mighty. You will find us here divine. You will find us where you left us, but not as you left us.
You will find us here memoried and storied. Here you endure and are luminous. You are not lost to us. The wind carries sorrows, sighs, and shouts.
The wind brings everything. Nothing is lost. These words of invocation from the poet Elizabeth Alexander. I invite you to please rise in body and or in spirit, to bring your hearts and your voices to sing together hymn number 1001 in the Teal hymnal, Breaths.
Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never left. The dead are not under the earth. They are in the rustling trees. They are in the groaning woods. They are in the crying grass. They are in the moaning rocks. The dead are not under the breast. They are in the wailing child. They are with us in our homes. They are with us in this crowd. The dead have a pact with the living. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the water. Zion, whoosh, whoosh, Zion, whoosh, whoosh.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see you this morning. Today, we're going to hear a story or a poem, actually, by the poet Amanda Gorman. She's a 23-year-old poet, and she was the first National Youth Poet Laureate for the country. And she also delivered the poem at the inauguration for Joe Biden. And she has written this special poem specifically for children in the voice of children. And so I thought it would be nice to hear this in the voice of a child. So please enjoy Chloe Edwards reading Change Sings by Amanda Gorman.
Change Sings, a children's anthem by Amanda Gorman, illustrated by Lauren Long. I can hear change humming in its loudest, proudest song. I don't fear change coming, and so I sing along. I scream with the skies of red and blue streamers. I dream with the cries of tried and true dreamers. I'm a chant that rises and rings. There is hope where my change sings. Though some don't understand it, those windmills of mystery, I sing with all the planet and its hills of histories. I hum with 100 hearts, each of us lifting a hand. I use my strengths and my smarts, take a knee to make a stand. I'm bright as a light each day bring. There is love where my change sings. I show others tolerance, though it might take some courage. I don't make a taller fence, but I fight to build a better bridge. I talk not only of distance from where and how we came. I also walk our differences to show we are the same. A movement that roars and springs, there's a wave where my change sings. Change sings where? There, inside me, because I'm the change that I want to see. As I grow, it grows like a seed. I am just what the world needs. I am the voice where freedom rings. You're the love your bright heart brings. We are the waves starting to spring, for we are the change we say. We're what the world is becoming, and we know it won't be long. We all hear change strumming. Won't you sing along? The end.
Let us center ourselves and enter into this moment breathing deeply, calling upon all the sources of love that are within, among, and around us. We gather in this sanctuary of caring across time and space, a place set aside as a sanctuary amid the many challenges of life, a center from which we may gather strength to face these challenges with courage and hope, faith and love. In this time of reflection, we lift up those in our community and beyond who are living through significant passages, the small and extraordinary milestones of life. Within our Cedar Lane community, we celebrate with Joanne and Steve Jersey, who are the proud and excited grandparents of Heath Lattimore Edmonds, born Friday, November 5th, to Jordan Jersey Edmonds and Andrew Edmonds. We offer hearty congratulations to Roger Santodomingo, who was recently named the executive editor at UU World Magazine. Our caring extends beyond Cedar Lane to others whose lives are lost and whose lives are impacted by violence, calamities, and the COVID-19 pandemic in our nation and in our world.
Within our Cedar Lane community, Kate and Mark Simon celebrate the marriage of their son, Andrew Simon, to Erin Krieger on November 6th. Andrew is the grandson of longtime Cedar Lane member Barbara Wing and the great-nephew of Cedar Lane member Pat Carlson. We hold in our hearts Daniel Dillon, brother of Marianne Dillon and her family, who has been hospitalized for the past 2 months. And we mourn the passing of longtime beloved member Mildred Reynolds last week. Let us hold these friends of ours, our companions in the world, and all the joys and sorrows that we continue to hold in our hearts in the stillness that silence brings. As we enter the silence together, those who are mourning a loss or marking the anniversary of a loss are invited to rise in body and or in spirit or share their names in the chat. On Veterans Day, we honor current and past veterans of our nation's uniformed services and their families for their service. We express our enduring gratitude both in our words and our actions to all who served, whatever their role, wherever their service took them.
We say thank you to those who were deployed, who served in combat, to those whose service was brief and those who made it to retirement.
We say thank you to those who remember their service with fondness and to those whose time in service still haunts them.
We say thank you to those who returned to us largely intact, who found jobs, started families, and who continue to find ways to serve their community.
We say thank you to those who return with brokenness so deep that they continue to struggle to find a role or even a home in our communities.
As we name the form of national service with which you identify, please rise in body or spirit or share your name, rank, and or name of the branch in which you served in the chat.
We honor those who served during World War II.
We honor those who served in the Korean War.
We honor those who served during the Vietnam War.
We honor those who served during the First Gulf War.
We honor those who served during the war in Afghanistan and Iraq.
We honor those who served in the uniformed services during peacetime.
We honor all those who currently serve in the uniformed military services, active duty, or reserve duty.
We honor family members of anyone currently serving in the uniformed military.
We honor family members of anyone who served in the uniformed military services, active duty, or reserve duty.
We also name and call out those who have a friend or a neighbor who serves or have served in the military.
We honor your service and that of your family member, friend, neighbor, and the integrity and the courage of your choices to serve. We honor the sacrifices you have made. Thank you.
Each week at Cedar Lane, we have an opportunity to practice generosity through giving. We build this community together, this community that holds us so closely and weaves us together day after day, year after year, to make love work in our community and around the world. This week, we're sharing our offering with Wreaths Across America in partnership with the Civil Air Patrol Parkland Cadet Squadron, which I serve as chaplain as part of the outreach ministry of this congregation. The mission of Wreaths Across America is to remember, honor, and teach. And according to their annual report last year, 1.7 million veterans' wreaths were placed in total across the country. Approximately 267,000 of them are at Arlington National Cemetery, right in our backyard, including 14,000 for the Soldiers and Airmen's Home National Cemetery. More than 1 million volunteers participated at 2,557 locations nationwide. More than a third of the volunteers were children. Over 500 truckloads of wreaths were delivered across the country by hundreds of volunteer professional truck drivers driving donated equipment and fuel from approximately 225 carriers. Now, there are many ways to give at Cedar Lane: by text, online giving, PayPal, QR code, or mailing a check, or by sharing your gift if you're here in person in the offering bowl in the back. Today, I hope that you will give generously in support of the missions of this congregation and in support of veterans, so that we may always remember their sacrifice. Thank you. Today's offering will now be gratefully received.
Save, O Lord, we pray, those defending in harm's way, keeping peace both night and day, ever faithful to the call. All our soldiers on their guard, hatred blocked and terror barred, helping us remain unscarred, ever faithful to the call. If they must advance to fight, side by side in darkest night, Lord, protect them with your might, ever faithful to the call. Heal our wounded with your hand, ease their pain by your command, give them hope so they can stand, ever faithful to the call. When their work comes to an end, bring them home to us again, as our praise and prayers ascend, ever faithful to the call. Touch our veterans, Lord, we pray, keep their minds at peace each day, so their hearts can firmly stay, ever faithful to the call. Lord, we thank you gratefully for the ones who keep us free. May they always boldly be, ever faithful to the call.
Good morning. At our annual meeting this past June, our congregation of Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church voted resoundingly in favor of adopting the eighth principle. The eighth principle states that we covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. While only a few words, delivering on the eighth principle will mean embarking on a transformation of our work at Cedar Lane. And this work can only be successful when undertaken as joint ministry shared among all of us. It is work that will reach back and surface our history as a religious community situated here where we are. As we heard earlier in the service, we are gathered today on the land of the Nacotchtank people. How do we implement the eighth principle in light of this fact, in light of our shared history and the lived relations around it? We were also reminded earlier that this land was worked by enslaved people without choice or reward. How do we implement the eighth principle in light of this fact, our shared history, and the lived relations around it? It is also work that will touch on how we relate to each other and to our community and beyond. The legacy of our shared history and all forms of racism continues to affect all our lives. How do we implement the eighth principle in light of this fact? What is our religious response as a faith community, grounded in love and committed to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning? The work is immense and at times may feel overwhelming, but the only way to tackle it is just to begin. To do this, most importantly, the Board of Trustees invites your partnership and participation as we work through our initial steps together this year. We will be guided in this process by our amazing ministers and senior staff, and in addition, we have established an eighth principle embodiment task force and a task force on widening the circle of concern. These groups will help us all by supporting the board's work first in helping us identify and prioritize steps that we can take to advance the work of the eighth principle, and then to act with the congregation to catalyze the embodiment of the eighth principle. We as your board are eager to support the congregation to undertake this critical work. We invite you to join us as well. We are going to need help from you to get this work done. If you have interest in participating, please contact any board member. I also want to thank Allison Moses and the many members of the Eighth Principle Embodiment Group for their leadership, as well as Eduardo Hernandez and Bob Essink for leading the new Widening the Circle of Concern task force. We have much work to do together, so let us begin, and thank you for being part of it with us.
Don't you let nobody turn you round, turn you round, turn you round. Don't you let nobody turn you round. Keep the straight and the narrow way. Don't you let nobody turn you round, turn you round, turn you round. Don't you let nobody turn you round. Keep the straight and the narrow way. At the river of Jordan, baptism was at hand, and John baptized the multitude for to save a sinner man. Don't you let nobody turn you round, turn you round, turn you round. Don't you let nobody turn you round. Keep the straight and the narrow way. Some they come by water and some they come by land. But when we get to heaven, we will shake each other's hand. Don't you let nobody turn you round, turn you round, turn you round. Don't you let nobody turn you round. Keep the straight and the narrow way. Keep the straight and the narrow. 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 Keep the straight and the narrow way. Keep the straight and the narrow way.
All right, Cedar Lane Quartet. And thank you. Thank you. Or is that the Cedar Lane Octet? That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Nate, for your powerful reflection about the work that the board has embarked upon, that you are inviting the congregation to join in, to partner in, as we seek to embody the work of the eighth principle. I just want to mention to you that Nate literally returned yesterday or Friday, 2 days ago, having spent almost 2 weeks at the COP26 summit in Glasgow. As part of Secretary John Kerry's task force that was engaged in some very critical conversations and decisions that were made at the summit. Thank you, Nate, for being there and for all the work that you did, and furthering this work that also calls us to look beyond to the way in which we should be responding as a community to really repair the damage of ecological devastation. Thank you. So on August 18, 1619, a ship called the White Lion with more than 20 enslaved African people dropped anchor at Point Comfort. Those Africans had been stolen by British pirates from a Portuguese slave ship that had taken them from present-day Angola and then sold to the British colonists. These 20 enslaved Africans were the first among the 12.5 million Africans who would be kidnapped from their homes and brought in chains across the Atlantic Ocean, known as the Middle Passage, in the largest forced migration in human history until the Second World War. Almost 2 million people did not survive this grueling journey. 1619. 12 years after the British set up a colony in Jamestown, Virginia. 1619, more than a year before the Mayflower landed in Patuxent, later renamed Plymouth by the Pilgrims. 1619, more than 150 years before Thomas Jefferson penned, "All men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." 1619, 157 years before the Revolutionary War, when all 13 colonies engaged in African slavery and enslaved people accounted for about 20% of the population. 1619, the birth of American slavery. 1619, the birth of a new nation, our United States of America. Now, this is the provocative claim of the 1619 Project, published 2 years ago by the New York Times and arriving as a book on November 16th amid a prolonged and heated debate over how American history is taught in our schools. The goal of the 1619 Project, spearheaded by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones, is to make explicit how slavery is the foundation on which this nation is built, and to which I would add the theft, pillaging, and genocide of indigenous people. The 1619 Project provides a historical analysis of how centuries of slavery and the century of legalized anti-Black racism that followed shaped American political, economic, and social institutions, and how slavery's legacy continues to shape American institutions. The project is an attempt to correct American historical ignorance about the causes of contemporary injustice, to place, and I quote, the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of the American story we tell ourselves about who we are. Now, the project is more than just a revision of previous understandings of slavery and the struggle for liberation by Black Americans, however. Much of the project is directed at understanding modern phenomena through the lens of previous acts of racial malfeasance. Of course, the critique of the project, especially from contemporary conservatives, was swift and loud. Rich Lowry, editor of the National Review, argued that the project presented the odious and reductive lie that racism is the essence of America. Conservative commentator Eric Erickson predicted that the 1619 Project could literally trigger the overthrow of the U.S. government. Of course, he turned out to be right on January 6th, when there was that attempted overthrow of the U.S. government, albeit by a whole different group of people. Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas introduced a bill that would have prohibited providing federal funds to schools that used the 1619 Project as curriculum material if it had been passed. And then, this past June, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell released a letter that called upon the Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona, to pull the essays from an educational program by the Department of Education. Now, the project also faced criticism from historians, with some liberal academics questioning its use of facts and the conclusions it draws. The liberal pushback has centered on 1619's more pessimistic tone, on its assertion that racist thinking undergirded many of the decisions made by American forebears and presidents, including the contention that the preservation of slavery was the underlying reason for the American Revolution. I know at least one person in this congregation who happens to carry that particular contention. And also the contention that Lincoln was very ambivalent about abolishing slavery. Now, at the heart of this opposition seems to be an entrenched notion of American innocence and American exceptionalism. That no matter how important slavery was in the country's creation and history, it cannot be used to define the United States. That the U.S. founders must be seen as unimpeachable heroes and our founding as a divine event. Unquote. The divine event, of course, alluding to manifest destiny. Now, this perspective seems to convey that being a patriot somehow means believing that the U.S. is a fundamentally good country and that its sins of racism or settler colonialism are aberrations rather than central to its history. And in this view, the United States was redeemed from the sin of slavery through the Civil War and from segregation by the Civil Rights Movement. And there seems to be no room in this argument for a more nuanced patriotism that sees a nation with racism as a central part of the DNA, and also a nation that can still be improved through constant struggle and work. The 1619 Project confronts not only the founders' innocence, but that of white Americans who tend to downplay the reality of systemic racism and white supremacy culture today. It challenges us to reflect on this fundamental contradiction how a country conceived with the founding principles of liberty and equality is still struggling with deep systemic racial inequalities that can be traced clearly to the legacy of slavery. Yale historian David Blight highlights this contradiction when he writes, "The biggest obstacle to teaching history effectively in America is the deep, abiding American need to conceive of and understand our history as progress, as the story of a people and a nation that always sought the improvement of humankind, the advancement of liberty and justice, the broadening of pursuits of happiness for all." Now, Blight's observation points to a fundamental problem with traditional history and the way traditional history is taught, which tends to make it appear that each event leads inevitably, inexorably to the next, like dominoes falling one after another after another. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, and then this happened. Slavery happened, then the Civil War happened, then slavery was abolished, then Jim Crow happened, then Civil Rights Movement happened, then Obama happened, and then a post-racial society happened. And then Trump happened. In her book, An Indigenous People's History of the United States, Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz writes, "The history of the United States is a history of settler colonialism, the founding of a state based on the ideology of white supremacy, the widespread practice of African slavery, and a policy of genocide and land theft. Those who seek history with an upbeat ending, a history of redemption and reconciliation, may look around and observe that such a conclusion is not visible, not even in utopian dreams of a better society." Last night in his Kiplinger lecture, Representative Jamie Raskin spoke about this challenge of holding the whole story, the whole cloth of our story as a nation, both the ideals and the hypocrisies. He talked about how Thomas Jefferson, a slaveholder and a self-proclaimed Unitarian who once famously and wrongly predicted that by the end of the century, every thinking American would become a Unitarian. He talked about how Jefferson rested the lofty ideals of the Declaration of Independence on the pillars of white supremacy and slavery, and how the American Constitution was gerrymandered from the beginning by the framers to support the institution of slavery. Representative Raskin proposed that the 17 amendments are actually a chronicle of the struggles of the common people to build a more perfect union. How they are a trajectory toward increasing inclusion and living into the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all people, no exceptions, and how it is still a work in process, not progress, process. He charged us to defend democracy by continuing to reform and transform our foundational documents and our institutions. So, coming to terms with the whole story of our United States versus the version of history we were taught in school is a challenge. But it is a challenge that I believe as Unitarian Universalists we are really up to confronting. Because it is very much a part of our spiritual DNA. You see, our Unitarian Universalist faith challenges us to follow the path of critical inquiry wherever it might lead, which is what is enshrined in that UU principle of free and responsible search for truth and meaning. It is a journey that we take even when it makes us deeply, deeply uncomfortable. If a new discovery along the way challenges us to alter our outlook or change our perspective, we are encouraged, no, urged by our faith to tackle that assignment rather than to sidestep it, ignore it, or cling on to our own opinions in a dogmatic fashion. That's what Unitarian Universalism is, and that is why it is such a scary religion to be a part of. Granted, liberal or orthodox, we all tend to read history through our own prejudices, as Wendell Phillips once observed. But our Unitarian Universalist faith calls us to examine our prejudices, our assumptions, our presumptions, and to dismantle them, discard them when they become untenable. Now, most Unitarian Universalists will say that they expect honest facts rather than reassuring fables or magical thinking from their ministers or their faith community. Right? And we come here for a reason, for learning and exploration, rather than the security blanket of creedal certitude and dogmatic comfort. Now, much of the time, this is a quality of our spirituality that we are really proud to own and proclaim. Unlike what Jack Nicholson said to Tom Cruise in that classic movie, A Few Good Men, we can handle the truth. Right, folks? Yeah, say it with me. We can handle the truth, like Jack Nicholson did. Even when it is uncomfortable, even when it is unpalatable, we can handle the truth. Even the truth of the harm in our own history, we can handle the truth together. The Reverend Bill Sinkford frames this in religious terms. He says, if we cannot know the truth of the harm in our history, if we cannot confess it, then we cannot repent from the ongoing violence of the structures we have inherited. Truth-telling, he says, leads to the work of repair, repentance, restitution, and reconciliation. But until we know the truth and name the truth, we remain stuck. So what does repair look like? What does repair look like for the specificity of harm done to indigenous and black people and people of color and the harm that is still being done? What does repair look like in Maryland, where slavery existed since the 1630s? And in the area that became Montgomery County in the mid-17th century, where most of the landowners were slaveholders, where at least 3 known lynchings of George Peck and John Diggs Dorsey in 1880 and Sidney Randolph in 1896 happened right here in our neighborhood in Rockville, Maryland. What does repair look like? What does repair look like to know more about and understand the whole history of our Unitarian Universalist faith and our own faith community, Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church, going beyond that liberal trope of progress onward and upward forever? What does repair look like? What does repair look like when we take collective responsibility, responsibility, accepting that it may not be our own fault, but it is still our problem? That it may not be that we are individually responsible, but that we are collectively accountable. What does repair look like? What does repair look like when we acknowledge that we are responsible for what we know and what we do with that knowledge? What do we do with that knowledge? As a congregation, we chose to make that important commitment to do the work of repair, repentance, restitution, and reconciliation last June when we overwhelmingly approved the 8th principle that states, we covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Now, these cannot just be beautiful words that we pass, words that we say to feel better about ourselves, but should be words that challenge us to do the work, the inner and the outer work, the personal and the institutional work of examining our values, our actions, our policies, our practices, where we lack, where we need to grow, where we have to do the work to reform and transform our individual and collective lives as a community, as a country. What we do with it now, what we do to build on this history, we the people's history, we live into the promise that we make to each other and the possibility that beckons. From the poet Amanda Gorman, being American, and I add being Unitarian Universalist, is more than a pride we inherit. It is the past we step into and how we repair it. For there is always light, if only we are brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it. May we be brave enough to see it, and may we be brave enough to be it. So may it be. Amen. Please rise in body and or in spirit to sing with some joy and energy number 1030 in your teal hymnal, Siyahamba.
Marching, we are marching in the light of God. 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 We are marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. We are marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. Singing, we are singing in the light of God. We are singing in the light of God. We of God. We are dancing in the light of God. We are dancing in the light of God. We are dancing in the light of God. We are dancing, we are dancing, we are dancing in the light of God. We are dancing, we are dancing, we are dancing in the light of God. Walking, we are walking in the light of God. 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 We are walking, we are walking, we are walking in the light of God. We are walking, we are walking, we are walking in the light of God. Siapa bukan yang kuengkos, 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 siapa bukan yang kuengkos.
All right, we are back. It's good to be back. Good to be singing together. Our benediction is adapted from the words of the Reverend Karen Johnston. Let us be a people of not forgetting. Let us practice holding collective memories that might otherwise slip into that enormous void that sucks at and corrodes any future we hold dear. Let us practice truth-telling up from the past that must come fully into the now, lest we falter and fall or fail, lest the whole remain in pieces. Let not our need for comfort or simplicity, for easy forgiveness or false pardon, smother the heartbreak that still needs healing. Let us practice resilience with reckoning. Let us marry memory and promise. Let us dance in the tension we find there. Let us rest in the integrity we cultivate there. Let us be partners with the possibility that emerges there. Let us wade in the water, even when the waters are troubled, guided by the love that will not let us go, let us down, nor let us off the hook, being faithful to the call of the beloved community. So may it be, so may it be. Blessed be.
In the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Who's that young girl dressed in red? Wade in the water. Must be the children that Moses led. Wade in the water. Oh, wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade trouble